Thank you so much first to the speaker, Samar Jodha, to all of you students here as well as faculty leaders. I must tell you, in fact, we have Jaini Oberoi also. I must make a special mention of him. He's on the board of governors of the Premji Memorial Foundation Trust, and he's based in Jaipur, chairperson uh, for CIA at one point in time, and then later for IGBC. He's been doing lots of work from out of Rajasthan. All I will say is this: I don't need to. It's like there are only 5 words that explain that you need to use to introduce the President of the United States. That's it. And like that, Samar Jodha, you need only 2 words. All of you students, even as you listen to Samar, please quietly browse Samar Jodha on the Wikipedia, and you'll find a whole lot of things about him. It will be redundant for me to say anything more than the fact that he is beyond an artist and an installation artist and very many other things. He is a truly inspiring speaker when it comes to exploring those frontiers of the mind that you need to as youngsters. All of you boys and girls who are all poised at the edge of what you know as a career that you need to be taking on in that big bad world, called professions and industry. You will find that there will be many, many things that Samar Jodha will leave with you as something that will be enduring. I will leave it there. Samar Jodha, the floor is yours. Please take as long as you want. I'm keeping it short in order that you have more time with the students.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for logging in. It feels like those times when we were sitting all locked up in our homes and we were all screen animals. But physically it's just impossible to be in so many places. So technology definitely plays a great part. What I want to talk about is, and I'm a big fan of this interactive space, especially from the students. It doesn't matter how vague your question may be, do not be shy about it because you're not sitting in a public space with another 500 people watching you. So just pick whatever you want to speak, whatever you want to ask, wherever you have doubts, just make a note so we can do that as later part of our session where Q&A is really critical because it's very easy for me to come and talk to you about my experience. You have a whole life out there, and when we look at people with experience, yes, we learn stuff, but then it's all about that, okay, you've done it, so it's very easy to talk about it, right? So going back to where do I want to start with? Well, I'm going to show you a short film, which we're just going to hold on for now. I just want to give you a little background of what I do. So I basically started working as I went to I went to NID about 40 years back on a UNIDO fellowship. That time there were no design schools in the country, but I don't know, somehow I got in there. I got out after 1 year, then I went to a photography school. I also tried film school, and I went to art school in the US. But somehow I couldn't really stick to most of them. I think my larger problem was that I was getting boxed, and I was young 20-year-old kid who just didn't have the patience to sit through these programs after programs. So anyway, that's just a little background to my education. I started working for a car studio in Boston, which was a very big deal thing. It was film days, late 80s. It was film was a mystery unless you were a professional or amateur or a rich guy who could afford cameras. Nobody went to photography then. So I worked for this guy called Ken Clemens, which was basically about, he was like I think his great granduncle was Mark Twain. So he was in the top 5 car studios in the world, probably. So I learned a lot of stuff. Of course, I spent 3 months cleaning floors and dropping his kids to school and cleaning his boat and all that stuff. But the reason I'm talking about this is that because I wanted to work for him, I wanted to get into that space. And in fact, I remember when first time I went there with my portfolio, they had come back from a shoot from Hawaii, and they were all looking at fixing up. There's so much of gear, they're putting it all in place. I also got involved. I put everything in place, whatever I could. And it was nighttime, and then I was leaving, and the studio manager said to me, "Why don't you start coming from Monday or whatever day? Start join us." And I said, "You haven't seen my portfolio, And he was like, we already have a photographer, we don't need a portfolio, So the point I'm trying to make is that, think of it this way, that every space you go in there, you don't go with your education, you don't go with your, whatever your portfolio or whatever 2-minute experience you have. It is something which should become your lifelong motto, that the learning never stops, which we keep talking about. It's always the case. But going back to the story, so this is where the changes started to take place. It was great money. I worked on, finally after 3 months, they took me on a shoot to Rhode Island, and we set up this outdoor studio. And in came from Wisconsin 2 trucks with 40 Harley Davidson motorcycles, and that's what we shot for like 2 weeks. It was a great experience, and I worked on lots of car shoes, blah blah, all that stuff. The money was great, and money is something which kind of holds us to whatever that mission you are onto. I don't know. It's not that I had some enlightenment or some awakening or something, but my big thing was that I wanted to do publishing as a photographer that time. So I decided, let me come to India. I came to Delhi for the first time, and I got into publishing. I did a bunch of books here. I did a book on architecture related, not architecture purely, but it was art and architecture. 900 years of city of Jaipur, Jaipur, the last destination. And then because I'd come from the West and there was no internet yet, there was a disconnect to the West, the other world. And I had my remaining leftover American accent. So they thought I must be also a fashion photographer. So I got involved in doing fashion work. But fashion work didn't pay because most of the designers were, NIFT was just about around that time. I think they were still at Tal Katora Stadium. Oh, no, they were Samrat Hotel. I think that's where they had started, in Delhi 1. And of course, design schools were taking off slowly and all that stuff. We were still living under that socialism space or consumption, all that stuff. Going forward, so basically, I started doing advertising. And advertising became really great money, and you were really pampered. But again, I kind of realized that book business, because it wasn't paying, so I was doing advertising. But I realized that books are like, okay, there's just an extension of your ego. I would say that, okay, I leave this legacy, another spine, one more spine, and you get buried because more books arrive on top of you, and then nobody really cares whether it's got an award or it's published by Christie's or whatever the big names were. So advertising was there. Again, you feel really great because print campaigns, all that stuff, launching Coca-Colas and shooting movie stars and all that. But again, I got really bored with that, so I quit that and I decided, let me go and work with the development space. So I started working with UNICEF and all these grassroots, including HelpAge and stuff like that. Those projects really started getting me very involved with at community level. I travel a lot in Middle East, East Africa, and in South Asia. But again, I realized after about a couple of years that this is just a supplier. There's not really anything happening. I'm not in any policy space. It's just that I can trigger a camera. So that's the reason I'm there. And, picture making is no big deal. If you're a creative person, you practice something for a while, you can wake me up at 3 a.m. and I can take a picture. What's the big deal about it? But is there anything beyond that? Is there something you want to create, talk about? You want to, and that's how things started changing, So anyway, so I worked with Gates Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates. They were setting up their foundation. So getting onto their jet and going to Calcutta. I think we were working on HIV at that time. But again, I got fed up with that. I quit that and I went to Dubai and I set up a film company there, and more like I would say a corporate communication company. And we started doing film photography, some branding work. And then they announced that there's something called world's tallest tower is going to be built there. Marketing was really small. It was EMAR with the developers. So I went to the airport and I hired a helicopter and I just flew around that empty piece of land and then came back and made these presentations, these very large, because there was no digital media and all, digital was not there. I mean, computers were there, of course, but we made these boards and we made this whole thing about making of history and why it's important to document building this downtown. Of course, nobody had any reference. I didn't have even a visual what that tower was going to, Burj Khalifa was going to look like. But I basically started putting together the logic to it. Now, this is a takeaway for you, that when you work for a client or for anybody, it's always about what is their not this cliched of what's their need. Need is the reason why you're called, but it's about putting them into a spaces where they don't know what it is. It's like almost like an education. So my trip was that let's make an archival center for Emaar, for Burj Khalifa, for future town planners, for architects, for students. So let's create something around that. And they, of course, it took me 6 months to sell the idea, and then they finally bought it. And then it was amazing. We worked across the board. We worked with Giorgio Armani, out of Milan, because he was putting his first hospitality business in the tower, away from fashion. I mean, parallel to his fashion. We worked in China, where all the cladding testing was done. We did a lot of work. We did time-lapse work. We did all the aerial stuff. There were no drones at that time, so a lot of helicopter shoots. A lot of this stuff went on shows like Mega Builders, the Nat Geo, Discovery, and all that stuff. We also did a show with SOM, the architecture firm, into the Skyscraper Museum in Manhattan. And then when you go into the tower, lots of the entire galleries and the timelines and the aerial work and time lapse films and all that stuff. So that was one piece. Now, the reason I'm saying this is that this was my commercial exercise. What it did for me, it basically set me free to what I really wanted to do. So I would say last 25, 30 years, I've been working on this, I would say, conflict issue. So this whole urbanization and consumption culture, as it arrives into global South, how it marginalizes communities and their way of life. So that's been my key focus. So, but I'm not a disaster pornography guy, and I'm not a messenger. The idea is to create experiences where people feel part of that. The problem, like I find that with art also, or picture making, or whatever it is, are you looking in as a creative person, are you looking in a mirror, or are you looking through a window? And that clarity is something which has obviously taken me a long time, but I'm interested looking through that window, because that through the window is where there is a larger inclusion. Otherwise, you're just sitting in this self-made, what I call as this wide cube gallery syndrome, where you have your collectors and your buyers and your clients, and they feel you are just brilliant because you have the articulation or a skill, but it's not really going anywhere. So I give you a small example of working with when I talk about globalization and this influence or impact on modernity, corporate responsibility, for example, and you'll see these little references in the video we'll play, but I'm just giving you a background because film doesn't give you all that. Which is, none of you guys, none of you students were born that time, but the world's biggest industrial disaster happened in Bhopal just about 42 years back now. And there were like thousands of people got killed because a Union Carbide fertilizer plant blew up middle of the night in December of 1984. And it just took away lots of people died, obviously. So I had gone much, much later for BBC. I had done some work. The plant is there. It's been sealed and all that. But again, now we are talking about you're sent for a commission. You're doing something for BBC, but because your antennas, and I keep saying this, that the biggest thing with creativity is not about specializing yourself in a skill and keep working on it. You got to keep yourself open to many more ideas. So out of curiosity, let's say I landed up the railway station. I spoke to some of the people there, and they were talking about that how it had happened, and so many dead people on those compartments and all that stuff. So I decided to create an experience. So what we did, I worked with a designer, and what we did was we created a train journey of that night. So we basically got a 40-foot container, what you see on these large ships. And it was a compartment where it's called Bhopal, a silent picture. You walk through this darkness, and inside you have these very large 3D pictures of the plant, of the steel plant, which I had been inside, where the machinery and the control room and all that stuff was, the inventory and all that. So it's almost like a metaphor, like looking through a train journey. Backlit images. Opposite side, we created to make the viewer feel more uneasy. We put about 20, 25 mannequins of different shapes and sizes. And then we stretched 40-foot long black fabric on it. So you have these shapes trying to come out of it. And from there's something called Bhopal Gas Period. There's an organization there. So we got names of people. Now, memory as a creative person, as an artist, what happens? Things fade away. Stories fade away. Names stick around. At least they stick around. That okay, my father or my grandfather's name was this. So at one level, you're also bringing that kind of memory alive. So we printed that on the black fabric. Hundreds of names. So you walk through this darkness, and because Bhopal used to be much colder, unlike now, so it's temperature controlled, so it's single degrees. So you feel that chill in there as you go through this darkness. You come out on the other side, and then there is a sound piece with that. So anyway, this was shown at India Art Fair, blah blah, all that stuff, Kala Ghoda Festival in Bombay and all that. And 2012, Dow Chemical was the sponsors for London Olympics, and they own Union Carbide. So we took that container with Amnesty International and we put it outside the Olympics, basically, for people to see. So, it's not about that you're being anti-Olympics or something, but, you got to put it out there, what these people do to masses who don't have a voice, right? So anyway, so it has traveled. We went to Venice, Biennales, all that, and I would work with local green parties and youth groups to create a little forum where they would talk about issues related to toxic, or whether it's any chemical disasters or whatever. And then in 2018, I put it on a ship and I took it to the US to Photo Fest, which is the biggest photo biennale out in Houston. So I traveled around. When I have little money, then I put it on a truck or something, or on a ship or on a train or something, and we put it down and we put out the ramp, put the temperature drops, lights drop, and people just walk through it. So it has a digital counter. So till date, I would say since 2011, it's been going around. We have over 350,000 people have walked through this container. So the idea really is that, what do you do with your practice? Now, I could do is go to Bhopal and create these images of people who have died, or families which are still remaining, left behind, or whatever. Or do I want to take something which, because we have become quite thick skinned actually, because social media, there's just so much bombardment of cinema, popular culture, news, all kinds of stuff going on, that how do you get people involved into invest into your thought, and Bhopal is an example of that kind, where you create that experiential art, what I call it, and then parallelly, I was also doing something else, which was I started documenting. I was still stuck in my photography. I was documenting the changing world of India's elderly. They came from undivided India, many born in Bangladesh and Pakistan or even Burma. And I spent, this was again on film, large format film camera. I started doing these portraits, environment portraits across the country. And it was about disappearing cultures. It was about people representing productive aging. People, there are stories. These stories are just fading because of nuclear families, people migrating, all that business. So I photographed about 400 people over 8 years, across from Kushwant Singh and Captain Lakshmi, who fought with Subhash Chandra Bose, to Pandit Ravi Shankar, to Bismillah Khan, to street musicians, to disappearing professions, to, there were all kinds of people from all across the country. And of course, we did an exhibition, and then it was like, somebody said, do a book, but there was no publisher interested, because all they wanted in those times, 20 years back, was a book on, the Taj Mahal or Delhi, Jaipur type of stuff. So I basically put together a publishing company and I published it. It costed me a lot of money, but I said, let's just put it there. So the reason I'm also talking about these are that when you get on a mission, there are no shortcuts. And do not keep yourself that butt, because that butt is the last thing. In fact, you should be kicking your own butt if you ever say butt, because butt is what it is about putting yourself in front of yourself and making yourself that, okay, I'm not getting through this. There's nobody stopping you. You're stopping yourself. And okay, it's very easy to say that, oh, I didn't have the money or whatever. you have to figure it out. I decided that, okay, let me do a Burj Khalifa, which will give me. So even on Burj Khalifa, the interest was a lot more than the tower going up. Of course, there was a team working and all that stuff. But I wanted to. So I've done a lot of work on migrant workers across Vietnam, China, South Asia, Middle East, all the way to East Africa. It's about cultural identity, cultural displacement. So in that Burj Khalifa, there were 3,500 men building that tower. And they all came from dozens of countries. And a lot of them, especially from India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, South Asia, Bangladesh, a lot of them were never photographed, because there were no phone cameras yet. And at least they didn't trickle down to. So their first picture was working with a with for a passport photo, and a lot of them were not literate, so they had to learn how to write their name because that was the signature on the passport to travel. So I basically wanted to recreate that experience. So we decided to start photographing. We built a studio there, and there were these timers where these cards were there, and every morning we'd shoot 100, 200 of them. And we started creating. We had these slates. We'd make them write their name, and they're holding it there, and we do a picture, in their blue or green overalls, whatever they're wearing with their helmet. The idea was really about to recreate that passport again. And it was also the larger issue of how men come to these construction sites, not just in the Middle East, even in India, it happens. You get stuck with this debt cycle. You just can't, it's a difficult space, especially for migrant workers. They leave their culture, they leave everything behind. So how do you deal with this? How do you deal with something where you have to make that money, but you are a mechanical, like a robot? You go to work, you come back, you shower, you eat, you go to sleep and repeat. You keep doing that. So I started doing a lot of recordings, a lot of interviews. And so anyway, I photographed 3,500 approximately men who were building the tower. I made 3,500 portraits, basically passport pictures. And we designed the show later on, a circular show, where, because of the debt cycle, you get in there and you can't get out, right? So what you have, these small little passport translites with a little LED in the back, and they're all holding this, and you're just surrounded by these thousands of men. And I'd also gone and done some recordings in the camps where they live, where I couldn't hear the other side. But people with less are the biggest hearted people. I mean, we all know that. And they were like, you have chai with them, you hang out with them, and then it's like, oh, I want to record your phone conversations. They were all okay. Of course, I couldn't hear the other side. So I re-engineered the sound. So what I have is sound piece which plays in this circular space. So they're all pieces, so you may understand Farsi and Telugu or Nepalese or Swahili or whatever it is. And that kind of plays like a little echo around it. So, I mean, I'm talking about is that how do you create that experience? How do you create, that, something which you can sense it being in the middle of whatever little bit I can, offer, So, anyway, so I'm sorry to run over all these different pieces. And one last one I would talk about. So this led to was, again, I was getting, after such big projects, more and more I realized that, am I a witness? Because witnessing is the easy part of it, as an artist, as a filmmaker, as a documentary, as a photographer, whatever it is. But what is it about that? How do you get involved in something which is, because the problem with most of these shows, let's say even photography, it's like I have this suitcase with 50 cameras, and I have been traveling for last 30 years in basically in conflict spaces. I spent time in Afghanistan. What's the conflict there? So I'm not talking war zone, but I'm talking about girl children not able to go to school. So we do these photography workshops, storytelling. We'll do an exhibition. We do some fundraiser. I've worked in Tanzania with albino kids. I've worked in Sudan. I've worked in Jordan with Palestinian children. In Delhi, I've worked in Vasant Kunj with Bangladeshi rag pickers colony. Their kids can't go to school. So I created all this, but the problem I have is that as an artist, it is your extension of that, oh, my creativity, and I'm working on it. But reality is this, that it's a circus, We may have great time, 10 days of all that stuff happening and all that, whatever, camera picture making. And then, so it's like a circus. The day circus leaves the next morning, there's nothing, there's just dust. People go back to their lives, there is nothing else they're doing. So my whole thought was that, how do you do something which has larger involvement because it's documenting is the easy part. You go shoot some dying tribe in middle of Africa and take a show to London, and everybody's like, oh my God. But oh my God is not doing it because you haven't, even doesn't matter even if you send some money back. I'm not even talking about that. But are you able to make any difference in terms of with community level? So I went on a World War II road. I drove from Kunming into Upper Burma, and I came to the Upper Assam, Arunachal, near. I drove from Kunming, so I came to a place called Margarita, so Digboy and all that. So these are all coal areas. That's the conflict. Communities who are local, they are not the kinds who work in mines. It's outsiders. So there's a lot of other work. So I won't bore you with all that long stories. But I got involved in that community. There are about 1,500 of them, this village of about 200 of them, no electricity. And I got involved at a level where I helped set up an ecotourism project there, built and owned by the tribe. I set up a school program where I sent a bunch of kids to schooling, and two of them went through college. I also worked on a reforestry program, but that was a failure because I'm not an expert on that. But it's all local knowledge. So that ecotourism project worked really well. We also helped build a monastery that added income to the village. So the idea was that, and then, I was speaking at TEDx Vienna about artists' role in sustainability and capacity building. So that got some people interested, and they connected with the village, and all these homes had a loom before mechanical manufactured clothes flooded the market. So a lot of them started reviving, and they did their little business out of it, And then they built me a hut there. We built a studio there, and then we started photographing, and I photographed the whole village basically over a period of time. So whatever the 6-8 years which I spent in and out of there, then we had this big show which we did in the village. Then travel came to Delhi, all that, and you see that vaguely. That picture in the back is part of that. Sorry, it's out of focus, but. That image is basically is the size of, so we created this experience of a coal mine. So you go in this pitch darkness, and there is a sound piece where there's no electricity in the village, so we recorded these night sounds of the village and in the community. And so those insects that are playing, and when you go inside, it's not a typical art show where because again it's about experience. So it's not your conventional show where everybody is walking out with the champagne glasses and chit-chatting and all that stuff. We would let only about 6 or 8 people in this pitch darkness, and these prints are spread all over, in corners, dark corners, with fabric to block the passage and all that stuff. And you put on a helmet, a miner's helmet with a little light on your forehead, and you go around and you just discover your own portraits. So when you come out, it becomes a conversation piece. It's an exchange of that idea, really, instead of just walking through, which I also do so many times. So reason I'm talking about all this is that how do you extend yourself as a creative person? So I think I've spoken for a number of minutes. I will talk about Red Balloon, which is what I really work with youth program. We will run a short film now, it's like a 3-minute film. So if you could please play that, and then we can start chatting again.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you.
30 years back, I started as a professional photographer, worked as publisher, filmmaker, helped corporates set up CSR programs. But as an artist, always wondered if my practice was beyond my shadow.
The sound is okay?
Yeah.
But I really needed to take it to a very different level where I thought that getting involved at community level is where my work will have a larger meaning to myself.
Okay. So this gives you some idea with the visuals. It's much easier to understand this. Now, what I'm going to do is basically pause here and let's get into some engagement since I've spoken quite a lot by now. Professor, anybody who would like to take from here?
I will invite one of you. Anahita maybe would want to speak, would want to respond to what he has so far spoken.
Yes. Thank you so much, Mr. Chandra, and thank you so much, Mr. Jodha, for sharing the video and for talking us through your amazing body of work. I think it's so important for designers, for creatives, and especially for design students to understand that, design doesn't just mean all glamour. There is a lot we can do in terms of community resilience, and I think your video really brought that point forward. So, documenting communities and documenting their resilience, I think, is a very important aspect of any creative field. And you're doing it through photographs. Somebody might do it through clothing, somebody might do it through writing, but these are all creative outlets which help us understand how our histories have shaped where we are going. So for that, I really thank you, and I really thank PJMT for organizing this session. I think it's been really wonderful to look at things from a different perspective, from your perspective, through your lens, quite literally. Yeah.
Thank you. Nice. Jaideep, would you want to respond? And there are many of you out there among the attendees and participants. If anyone wants to speak, just put up your hand.
Yeah.
We will ensure that you get audio.
Yeah, Samar, it was very beautiful, nice video.
Thank you.
And it is giving very motivation to us. Like the journey you have shown, very, very beautiful. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for sharing your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so now we are gonna be really, let's dive a little deeper because I've spoken about me and I can keep talking. In 35 years, there's a lot of work which I can be doing there all day long.
Just one moment. Samar,
yes.
I'll see if I can invite a couple more people to speak.
Yes,
Nagaraj heads a School of Urban Design and Planning, Nandita, I have brought you in here. Would you want to speak? You are now on a talk mode. Nandita, you have to, I think you're also unmuted. I mean, no? No. Okay. Sorry, Samar. Let's try one or two more people who might want to say something that'll add to some perspective to what you want to
Please.
offer.
Yeah.
Jeremy O'Brien is here. Jeremy O'Brien, yes, there you are. Good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for being here. Your thoughts, please.
I'll change. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
I can't hear them.
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
We can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, to begin with, even if I can't hear you, that's all right. But somewhere down the line, hearing to Samar Jodha was very interesting. It makes me go back 40 years of my life because somewhere down the line, we have a common connect. We started about the same time. I was thinking, while he was talking about experiences, I was thinking of my time at the Northwestern, at the Long Island.
Right.
And then having traveled in these few decades, all the maybe 3/4 of the globe or more. Very interesting, Samar. You're a very interesting person. I'd love to meet you. And how do we involve you more with IGBC that HH would take care of? But
Right.
of course, I had a different take on today's session. My take on sessions was which CII and IGBC both are planet and living. How do we consume less, right? So I thought probably this session is going to be on reducing using consumption levels.
Yeah.
HH, you got me?
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Maybe he will want to
But
offer
otherwise,
something.
I think it's great. So if we can have his inputs on one of our sessions in November or some other, you see, to reduce consumption levels, that's what I basically had in mind at that time.
Right. Yeah.
And very nice hearing to you, Samar. And join us sometime at the Lit Fest here in Jaipur. Have you attended that ever?
Yeah. Well, a very long time back, but yeah, I'd love to show up. I must do that.
Sanjoy is a personal friend. In fact, Sanjoy and I were honored by the royal family of Jaipur the same day. That was 2018, 20th October.
Right. Yeah.
So visit us sometime here. Right?
Yeah. No. Let's plan that out. And I'm glad you've stirred this thing to coming to this consumption. So we will need to get to it. If there's anything else you want to cover, then let's get on.
No. I just want to hear your views on reducing consumption levels.
Of course.
I mean, not that I'm the ideal person to speak on.
Then you're absolutely right. Thank you for reminding him. And he's taken a pause. The idea was to see if we want to listen to people like you, and you brought in one of those very relevant things. Let's see if others here will have something to offer. Dr. Priya Chaudhary, any of the other students, anyone? There you are. There is somebody out here. Sachin. Yes, Sachin. Please speak up. You can unmute and speak. Whatever you want to tell us. Sachin, you have to just unmute. You are ready to, we have there you are. Yes, Sachin. Yes, Sachin. Please speak.
My question was to Samar Jodha, sir, that how do you convert your abstract emotions into physical objects? What is your process in that whole method? I would like to know.
How do you convert abstract emotion to something that is okay? Yes, understood you.
Right. That's a very good question, and we need to really be in the space of little difficult questions. Otherwise it's so easy to just pass anything on. So how do you convert? I don't think it's really about, skill is a tool, right? And now how do you use that tool is what it's all about. Maybe you use that tool for a client, who wants, let's say, a product design, a glass design, for example. Maybe that skill you want to take it further to figure out that why there is no water in that community. So what I'm trying to do is that I have the skills. I've worked with, as a sculptor. I've worked as filmmaker, publisher, photographer, blah, blah, all that stuff. I don't come from development sector. I don't come from education. I don't come from any of these areas. But it's not that I'm some extraordinary human being. what really works, what I was talking earlier also, is that, how many, see, when you're young, and a lot of you here are students, when you're young, your antennas are everywhere because you're just into so many different things. But what happens is, as you get older and as you start playing safe and as you start want to make more money and name, and the pressures of family, children, tuition, 2 holidays in a year and a new car every 2 years, all, what happens is that you start focusing yourself into a space where your skill starts ruling you more than your emotional space, if you know what I mean. Because and there are few who do manage to keep that. I'm not like entirely qualified myself, but there are a lot of people who see themselves that skill is so secondary. Skill is just a tool. And what are you trying to say finally is what it is, and what you're trying to say, not to the client, what you're trying to say to yourself. Do you believe in stuff where are you prepared to walk away from something which you don't believe in what the client is talking about? So now, easy said also at one level, because you may not like any of your clients and you just go starvation. So I don't mean it that way. But what I'm saying is that if you do have the perfect example of that Burj Khalifa, it was a big ticket thing, lots of stuff going on. But I wanted to, because when I do a Bhopal or I do anything else, it's nobody's going to pay for that stuff. Nobody, there are no corporate sponsors, because I'm basically pointing my finger on those corporates, so they're not going to be running with their checkbooks behind me. But what I feel is that because you have the skill, because you have that ability, and you feel, so going back to that antenna thing, what I was saying was, sorry, I left in the middle of it, is that your awareness is really important, because your awareness will keep everything. As I said, I'm not qualified for a lot of these things, but the reason is because I have the interest. I want to read, I want to talk, I want to hear other people, go to forums, look at other people's work. And that's where these things start, kind of create those sparks within yourself. And I think that's really important, not to shut those antennas out just because the temptations or what that treadmill requires, treadmill of survival, basically. So, and then it automatically is, and sorry to take you to a really long drawn answer, but it goes back to this whole consumption. How do you cut down your consumption? Now I'm a really terrible example for that, because I lived a life between, three cities over 20, 25 years, in Delhi, in New York, in Dubai, doing all these fancy commercial works and traveling all across the world, and clients giving you fat checks every end of the assignment and all that. I actually, 11 years back, I walked away from all that stuff. I sold everything I had. I don't own any property. I sold my cars. I don't have any transport of my own. I put my, some of my art projects in storage, like that 40-foot Bhopal container. I can't travel that around. So that sits in storage in Houston. I had lots of books which I put away in a storage. I gave away quite a few of them. I don't own anything. For 11 years, I have been living between service apartments and, guest houses and hotels and friends' homes and all that stuff. So it's not that I have a very clear, clean, carbon footprint. I travel, so I do spend, airline time and all that stuff. So what I'm saying is that you need to really think about that. And you guys are too young right now. I understand you need to go through the process before you start taking that call. But if you're conscious about it right from the beginning, that where do you take your habits, which are forming right now, whether it's your digital addiction, or whether it's your going on sales and buying stuff, these are like very small little things, but they make a big difference. And bottom line is, what are you doing about it yourself? You cannot say, oh, the whole world is throwing garbage on the street, so maine phenka to kya farak padta hai, but that is not what this is all about. It is your own self. Is are you building something, or that thing is building you? That's where it is really. So I don't know if it answers your question, but that's where I'm coming from.
Anyone else wants to? Fascinating. Here is a man who doesn't own anything. He's decided that I will not be emotionally unsecure.
I would
Yeah,
like to
because
come in.
other thing, sorry to interrupt. The other thing is that we get really worried about that. Our definition is, we're so worried about how we're getting defined. whether it's in a relationship, whether it's with friends, I'm sitting at a friend's house where this printer is. It's not my home, I come and stay here when I'm in Delhi. I mean, it's my picture in the back, but that's not the point. So, when we get stuck in this getting defined, that takes away. And reality is that none of that stuff really matters. Believe you me, it doesn't matter. I'm not saying it because now I'm some aging artist or something, but I think we get so. And okay, who do you want to look at? Forget about what I'm lecturing you. Look at your own parents. Look at your own grandparents. They never lived under this how am I getting defined. So you don't need to look anywhere else. And they're the best examples, and they lived such a beautifully complete life, compared to the struggles we are doing right now in trying to match up and live up to whatever is, out there, that how am I going to be looked upon, how am I going to be judged, how am I going to be, so I think that, you don't need to go too far. You can look within yourself, within your families, and you realize, and then you'll realize that this whole cycle which will happen to you down the road, that more I earn because I want to own more things, and the more things you own, so more you got to run on that treadmill. And it's an endless exercise, believe me. And you don't need clutter of people, material, or whatever those stupid experiences you may think you're gathering, because end of it is just a very small little world you're going to live in. And as long as you live in that world with your consciousness, and you feel that I'm taking responsibility towards myself, forget the world. I haven't taken that responsibility just because I went to Vipassana, or I went through whatever. It doesn't mean that's how, when I said 11 years back, okay, all this stuff is out now, it's not. This is not about giving a lecture to people that how we are talking about this right now, because this issue is being spoken about. But you make those choices for yourself. It's the most important thing you'll ever do, believe you me. Right now you guys are all 18, 20, 24, whatever it is. But when you are 50, you look back and say, oh my God, I really made a change for myself. And believe you me, it'll be a much more joyful life, because it is a chase. Of course, the world is about survival. It is about money. It is about your profession. It's about success, all those medals and whatever you need. It is all that. I've been through it myself. But more and more you put yourself, and more you realize that it is just not worth it. What happens with that? You forget about destroying rest of the world. You actually damage so much of yourself. Your relationships, they don't work because you don't, you are hardly present. You are out at work, traveling, whatever it is. Same, whether it's your partner, whether it's your parents, whether it's your sibling, your friends, or whatever. That balance is what it is. And that balance is very easy to say, oh, you gotta have work and play balance. Forget work and play balance. Have a balance within yourself. I mean, that's really the most precious thing you'll carry till your last breath. So sorry, I keep going in very long drawn answers, but
That's okay. It's okay. Anyone who wants to say anything, if you don't speak, it will not
I'm going
excite him
to
to
say
say more.
something,
Yes,
Doctor.
please. Yes, fine. Yes.
Samar, it was just incredible listening to you, how you made your practice, your spiritual path. I think that's what it is. I mean, there cannot be a better example of detachment. There just cannot be. You're living it. I mean, everybody just talks about it, preaches it. It says someday we'll get there and whatever. But you're actually living it. I can't imagine it would have been easy to take that step of selling everything and moving into a suitcase. And I know you do that for the last few years. I've known that. So honestly, I think so inspiring. If I had heard you when I was 20, I think it would change my life.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, sure.
But Payal, you gotta also, I mean, I'm sure a lot of us will buy into this, that if everybody lived in a suitcase, I think most of the economy would collapse. You need consumption. I understand that.
Well, yeah. Interestingly, Samar, I'm sure you'll have your own take on this. If you look at the transportation sector,
Right.
the numbers of people who are these Gen Zers, or let's say the cusp millennial and all that, they have stopped buying cars. They stopped buying homes. They stopped buying furniture in homes.
Yeah.
I have people I know who are maybe 30, 35, who say, well, it doesn't make sense for me to be owning a two-wheeler or a four-wheeler or whatever, because there are enough things that are available. Yesterday, I'm meeting somebody who says, well, it doesn't make sense for me to buy a house at all. This guy is about 37. He's been given an option to buy something where somebody gives him a little bit of money. And the rest of it, he's got it back with EMIs and such. And he says it's a waste of time and money. And I'm quite happy living where I am and so on, you know. There's another guy I know who never has, over the last, say, maybe 15, 18 years, bought furniture for a place. He always hires. So the markets have changed. You know what it means in terms of sustainability? If, for example, EVs are not being bought today because it's economically unviable, you have to run at least 100,000 kilometers before it becomes viable in terms of the investment you make. Now, if you're owning an electric vehicle, you're not going to ride 100,000 kilometers anyway. But if it is an Uber or some such thing and they buy, and it becomes your extended personal transportation, can you imagine what happens to your roads? You release at least 1/3 of the city's parking spaces, maybe more.
Right.
So, and beginning to happen in places like Barcelona. So I think this essential Samar Jodha of someone who says, I am emotionally secure, I don't need to own or possess anything in life,
Right.
is an extension of such sustainability values and angles. Payal, do you see what I'm saying? Any of you here would want to respond to
Absolutely. I think this is sustainability at its best. I mean,
Right.
what more can you do? I mean, look at the amount of, yes, he said he travels, but that can't be the same as somebody who travels every single day and has a car and, it's minuscule.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, but I think something which Payal and so many of you here involved in this whole platform, it is so much about those two juries have seen the most unbelievable work what young minds have brought in, where you very rightly spoke about in this whole idea of sustainability needs to go beyond your t-shirt, your practice, your personal practice, your professional practice, education, they are all governed by that, and I think there are so many of these ideas which I remember from the last jury and the one before that. There is such amazing young people I met, which really inspiring. I wish I was that much of brightness I had when I was like 20. But it's so sorry to carry this forward. When we talk about, let's get back to the education, what most of the students are going through at this stage. Now, when I touched upon the personal choices, one student, I'm sorry, I forgot his name here, but who spoke about that, how do you get your emotional space sorted, what you were talking about. What I believe is that, you can, okay, let's say if you're an architect, you go to a client, typically you go to a client and you talk about, sustainability and all that. They are not interested. They're just running a bottom line, cheap material, how quick can you build it? And so I can sell it, right? So those things are always going to be there. But what I'm trying to say is that always run something parallel, which is your own little world. I always say this, there has to be one cocoon of yours where you do things where you feel that, okay, I believe in this. Whether it's about working on a pro bono, whether it's working with people who are not able to create these large, since you're talking developers or architecture, whatever, you got to go look, because there are a lot of people who think like you. It's just that you got to go and meet them. You got to go and identify them. And that's where you will bring your set of skills and your thoughts and your ability and all that stuff. So as a student, I always talk about to students is that, what are you going to do with the skill? You are somebody, most of you who are here, coming from design, let's say, you were really brave, because we are all born with creativity, as they say. But then they send you through this education system. You go to class 1 and 2 and 10, and they'll inject chemistry and they'll activate your left brain. And that left brain, unfortunately, make the right brain go to sleep. Now, the trouble is that the right brain is there. It's not that it's gone away. But there are a few brave ones, people who are using, architects or whoever, any creative person using as a practice, a lot of designers, let's say, as a professional designer, for example. What I believe is that the trouble today with creative people is also becoming the same problem. When I went to NID 40 years back, we were in a place called Paldi, where you had creative people thinking, and there's this, I mean, I'll give you a metaphor, and it's really important for the students to connect to this. You were taught how to draw that perfect circle. That frustration is there. You're drawing it and it's not coming right, and you're drawing, and then you slowly figure it out. Meanwhile, across town, there is something called Indian Institute of Management, top business school at that time. And there they are teaching you that how do you create a business model that from 10,000 cement bags, how can we make it to 20,000 cement bags? So there are two different sides of your head. You know, there's a logical head and there's a creative head. You both graduate out of it and you come out. That person from there is, got the bonuses and running that entire operation from 40 to 100,000 cement bags. Meanwhile, you have figured out your circle, how to do that, whatever that skill is. And then what you do is you find clients, and be an artist, be a designer, anything, wherever you're selling your practice. They will look at it as like, this is a perfect circle. Can you make me 20 of them? Yes. Okay, now you figured out that this is my client, this is my practice. Now let me amplify it. And you keep going. So the point I'm trying to make is that you should have gone to that IIM, to figure out how to amplify your practice, because the struggle you had when you were working and trying to do that perfect circle was probably the most amazing time of your life. Like they say, when you get older, my student life was so great. Believe you me, that struggle what you had is the ultimate thing, because you have to keep struggling as a creative person. I don't mean starvation, but you have to keep trying new things. As I keep saying, I wasn't a publisher. I don't come from, you saw Red Balloon, I don't come from development sector. I do not come from being a sculptor or being a painter or a filmmaker. But damn, I went in there. Cement I've never worked with, metalworking I had no idea about. I didn't know how public art projects are done. So, they are new places. I'm not saying that it's been success. A lot of stuff fails also. You burn your fingers and you lose your mind over it and all that stuff. But thing is that you want to keep trying new stuff. Don't waste your time if you're just going to keep duplicating that one practice you have figured out, because that is where, unfortunately, you will be quite a sad person end of your life, that, oh man, I knew so much, and what was I chasing all this while. And I think, I'll just give you a couple of parallel examples to this. So I went to American University, Dubai, about 25 years back. I was in Dubai. They had called me to teach some photography, design thinking. Something was there. Temporary, the faculty was out in America. So I was brought in for, I think, about a month. So I did a bunch of classes. They had some feedback from the student that, this guy can speak well, blah, blah, whatever it is. And I was called into the dean's office. There were these 3-4 people sitting there. I don't know who was the dean in there, but and they said, would you like to come and teach? And I was traveling a lot that time in Syria, and this is before the civil war and all that, in Yemen and all these places. And they wanted to know that if I could spend even 3 or 4 classes in a week. And I said, I can't do it. So anyway, they're like, no, you got to do it. Let's see what we can work out. But do you have an MFA? And you need that much to teach. But can I tell you, I didn't study beyond grade 7. So that's all I have. So I said, I've got grade 7. Will that work? And they all started laughing. They thought I was kidding. So it's not about grade 7. What I'm trying to say is that not knowing anything and you're going to still try it, man, there is nothing bigger than that. Because life is too short. You want to get into something where you have no idea how the hell this thing works. And that is what that circle is. Because if you figure it out, it's the most boring thing, just going on and on and on. You might as well make that cement, what I was talking about, So I'll pause here. Please continue.
Can you tell us of the most outstanding failure of yours?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, failures. I think, Professor, what I feel is that failures are not something which are left in a box, right? And you know this better, that it's something else you're trying on basis of that failure. Something totally different, probably. Totally away from that. But because you've been through that hole, and see, bottom line is also what I talk about is that when I go to a client, or if I find it difficult, or anything where the situation, environment, or people especially making it difficult for me, no matter how much of money, how much of temptations, whatever it is, why am I able to walk away from it is because I feel that it can't be worse than grade 7, Subconsciously, it basically just tells me that there's nothing to lose, So I think So sorry, it wasn't your answer, but I'm just trying to say is that how do you walk away from, and failures are always about, forget about cliched answers that, oh, you learn from failures and all that stuff. Of course you learn from that. But I think there are new ideas come out of failures, which basically help you generate new things. And not necessarily that they're going to be great. They may be another lesson, who knows, right?
That's right. Anyone else who wants to say anything at all, he can go on for the next 1 hour. But you need to know what you want to ask. Excite him into exploring some angle that might interest you. Anyone here among the students, please raise hand and we will enable the audio for you.
Yeah, please do. I mean, I'm very happy to hear all kind. Don't be shy about it. Just ask. Maybe the simplest question.
Only way to learn. Go ahead and ask. Please, any one of you who is here. Dr. Jaideep, do you think you will encourage your students to ask? A lot of them here are from your institution. Anahita, you have any students here who might want to ask or say something? Why should they ask? It's possible that they have something interesting to offer.
I don't think so. They've joined, sir, today.
Yes, Nandita, since you have unmuted.
Yes, sir.
You know you are teaching at least 500 students. You're doing something or the other with them every year. What is he saying, and how do you think that can rub off on any of the students? We need this kind of audacity, if you ask me. He's an audacious man. He's not an ambitious man at all.
Correct. Yes. Today, you have a mixed trend, I think so. So people say they want. Money is one thing which they are looking at. For any small thing, they ask, how much would you pay? What will that give me? So that kind of attitude students have today. So any sessions or anything you ask, earlier, students were eager to learn. They used to wait for masters to come give them tasks or make them execute. Being in creative field, they say that they have that ownership. Whatever they create, they say like, this is mine.
Right.
So if you identify their talent and talk to them and say like, I have something for you, would you do it? They'll say, how much will you pay? Right from the beginning.
Right.
So money is one language they understand from the day one, probably the exposure they're getting today.
Right.
So, and rest is like their passion, their way they would like to walk. Whatever they are doing and saying is the right thing for them. So that iconism or having a godfather and walking his path, for us, it was for our generation. But today, motivating them and say, this is not the way. You have to sculpt yourself in a better way to become something, to stand out so that the money comes to you. Right? This
all
is
you
what
guys are
is a
listening to her
challenge in the
speak.
education.
Do you agree with her? There has to be one student here who stands up and says, ma'am, you're wrong. Is there anyone here? Please speak up. Any of you here? There's so many of you. There are 30 plus people as students here, minus 1 or 2 people who are faculty. Do you want to be provoked by what she said? Nandita ma'am is saying, you guys do not know what you need. You guys are not people who do anything but pursue money. Is she right?
Is like temporary
Is she right on that?
pleasures they are
It's
looking
just not
at.
speaking up. You see, that's one challenge we have.
Yeah, it is like a temporary this thing they are looking at. They are not enjoying that kind of innocence which they had to have. They are not accumulating knowledge and coming out. So this motivation, I'm figuring out how to bring that zeal in them to learn, to come forward, to take it forward. So if you have any ideas like that, the way you have motivated yourself to travel across, explore yourself and come forward. So
good question.
Yeah. So I would love to take it.
Right.
Students.
Yeah. No, I totally get it. I mean, I work under this whole Red Balloon program. What we do, I've come across a lot of, I work between, about 12 to 21 age group students. And it is a challenge. Earlier, I used to think that, which is again a learning for me, I used to think that it happens in privileged space, but it's not privilege. It's just the era of, digital noise and this whole world of so much about individuality, but to such a level that and yeah, and then I'm sorry to say, but it's my generation is really responsible for today's mess because they live in a very uncertain world, and it's not
Yeah,
their creation. This is the gift we are giving them forward. And
correct.
it's a but in terms of motivation and all that, also I think we all know, we've all been through it. The trouble with education is also, earlier we used to think that if you went to a physics or a doctor or a law
Mm,
school or whatever, it was
mm,
about, my God, you have to perform. But
mm,
unfortunately, the education system, and it's across the board, whether it's Harvard or whether it's Finland or whether it's a government school in Delhi, the reality is just that everything is so standardized on performance. So when education is set on a performance meter, it gets really difficult, because that's where I was struggling, because that fish has to climb a tree, and that
yeah,
climate tree is a very difficult thing. And as a faculty, as professors and teachers out here, you can very much see the talent of so many students. They look very out of place, but they have something very special, but they don't fit in. And you cannot create a different
correct,
set of deliverables for them, because the
correct.
system demands that you need that degree or piece of paper you have to go
Yeah,
through. So what I talk about is also, because it's your individuality, and this talking more to the students about it, is that, which I always say this, people come to me, photographer, let's say, for example, and they come and talk about that, I've got this passion, I love these picture making, and I want to go and study and photo and all that stuff. And or they've already kind of figured out what they want to do with it, but I want to make a living out of it, which is fine. They're not talking, I want to make tons of money out of it, make a living out of it. What I say to this is that in this world, unfortunately, because of the circumstances, whatever generations that is, I'm not talking as young people, is that we go through this process of survival, which is a tough one. As your day job is a tough one, because as you get older, your responsibility, children, family, all that stuff happens. What I'm trying to say is that you have that skill, or not skill, sorry, that passion you have of that picture making. Don't turn your passion into something which is going to be about making a living out of. There are very few who
correct.
can do it, but don't put yourself there, because that's the only spot of sanity you have. It is your oasis of your that cocoon of something where you don't have to respond to the world, you don't even have to share that with your own family. It's something you come back. I love working with plants, but I can't go and become a hotshot gardener out there running a big huge business out of it. But I love that because I have a small little kitchen garden. And so what I'm trying to say is that keeping that also helps you in keeping your balance of your mental health, because
Correct.
you are fortunate to have something which you are very passionate about it. You're not tying it up for your survival needs. So whenever you get punched by your client and by your your associates or whatever it is, you're coming back and you feel at peace with that. Okay, I have my little world out there, within myself. And I think that's really important, because it is getting tough very easy. As I mean, we all know that it's not fault of young students, because life has become that. It's not something which is we point out to just young generation. They are living in a world which, as I said, we have given them that world. We have ourselves got stuck to our screens, and we expect our children not to look at it. Is a little unfair, right?
Correct. So, keeping this in mind, what we have taken as an initiative in my institution is try to revive them and bring back, give them that childhood, that age wherein they explore their themselves and identify what they are good at, what is their passion. So,
Right.
we have come up with a list of clubs. So, every faculty who has got that inclination towards that, like dance, theater, drama, music, instrumental and vocal. So it is apart from the curriculum, wherein I have a literature club also, wherein you think and write.
Right.
Apart from the regular schooling, what we do, architecture, planning, design, and masters we have these programs. So this is compulsory mandatory for the students to become a part of the club. They have to enroll,
Oh, okay.
register, and every week we have faculties also enroll themselves. So whatever they've left undone during their childhood, they will be exploring themselves now and take it as a habit. So they look forward for this.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
then they are working so that if they want to, after completing and having their degree, navigate and become something, a musician, a theater person, or whatever, they can also do it. So what we have initiated is like, I'm giving that opportunity also, like creating a day for it to
Right.
express your talent, coming out with your own music and composing your music, or this thing like a talent show. And I'll be putting it in the social media so that if somebody can identify, that builds them confidence also, and the screen time is like taken away from them
Right.
weekly.
Yeah.
So this is what is the initiative I've
That
tried to
is
do, and
That's
tried
really.
to,
nice. Very nice.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
That
I've tried
you,
to
Samar.
do this in my institution now, and exploring. I'm also doing a lot of experiment to make sure they are human in nature, and then continue with their passion in life,
Yeah.
as you said, so they know what is important for them in life.
Right.
So
So,
this is, it was very inspiring to listen to you also. I said if I can buy some ideas from you, that
Yeah.
definitely I would be it would
Yeah.
be helpful
So,
for me to take it forward for the younger generation.
of course. So,
Thank
I
you
think
so
one,
much.
no, thank you so much for that. I think one critical thing is that self-worth has become a very critical thing at these times, right? I
Yes,
mean, we all know
yes,
that. And how
yeah,
do you bring this now? Empathy, for example, is not
correct.
a chapter in a textbook. How do you raise empathy,
Very
right?
true.
So that's a very tricky space. And
Yeah,
this whole thing about what Red Balloon, you just saw that little piece there. But Red
correct.
Balloon is a program where we work with privileged, underprivileged, mainstream, between
Mm,
12 and 21. And what
mm,
we do is basically work with mentorship programs where we bring in
correct.
mentors who come from a puppeteer to a storyteller. I mean, between visual arts and performance
Correct.
art, dozens of
Yes.
different tools are there. So we bring
Yeah.
in that. We don't need a PhD. So there are all kinds of people we identify. So typical exam, I'll give you, one or two modules how we have done this. So we
Mm,
worked with 16 kids out of
mm,
Dubai, Chinese children coming from extremely privileged family, parents working for China Rail, blah, blah, lived all over the world and all that stuff. And they were
mm,
having issues at 16 years age where you don't want to talk to your parents. They had anger issues. They had this loneliness, depression, digital addiction, all that stuff. So these 16 kids from two different schools got together. Well, we got them together and they went through this program. It was a 10-day program, which, of course, cultural portability is important. So we brought a Chinese Tibetan
mm,
mentor designer onto it. And
mm,
so the model is that they come up with the issues. So they came up. So one girl talked about sexism, one kid talked about bullying, one talked about, body shaming, whatever
mm,
it was, and
mm,
not able to fit into a global city like Dubai. So how do you get a
mm,
solution out of it? We
mm,
basically went through the process where they
mm,
identified their issues, the
mm,
challenges they had, and through the
mm,
mentorship, because we create that safe space where they
mm,
started expressing and whatever their issues, and so they came up and they actually deconstructed this entire thing, and then the
mm,
next leg was finding the solutions. So they found their own solutions out of it, and then it was like,
mm,
how do you want to output? So they wanted to do films, so we got a filmmaker involved and they made 3 minute each 16
mm.
films basically,
Oh,
which were shown
super.
to the parents who were in deep shock that my child is going through this, blah, blah, all that stuff. Now, when we talk
Mm,
about leadership, this achievement, space, self-worth, and all that.
mm,
So
mm,
from
mm,
there,
mm,
it was taken to the school. And
mm,
two headmasters, they made sure that every morning in the assembly, they were showing two films. So within like about 8-10 days, these kids became such leaders because everybody started talking about the challenges what a typical 16-year-old kid faces, right?
correct.
So
Yes.
what I'm saying is that this, and I love the idea what you just said, in
Mm,
terms of these book clubs and literature clubs, whatever it is.
Yes,
Now
yes,
imagine that if that can expand further, where it starts becoming a purpose, because they
yes,
love it, because they're passionate. They
yes,
love it because
yes,
they've come out of their own will. They love it because they
yes,
have signed up, not because they've been told. So once they're in
yes,
there, and then if that purpose comes into place, whatever they may be, I don't mean that you have to go
correct.
work with slum kids or whatever, but what happens is that then that feeling is much better than getting a grade B in the class, if you know what I mean, because
Yes,
it's you own that stuff and you feel
correct.
so proud of it that so that's where your empathy also kicks in, so you become a better person, a better
Yes,
listener, better everything.
yes,
So so this is across the board. We worked with 20 girls out of Bombay, coming from low income group family, huge exposure
mm,
to
mm, mm, mm,
traffickers. So we got an
mm,
anti-trafficking artist involved, a woman artist
mm,
involved. She went through the
mm.
process with the rest of us. And then these girls talked about such a taboo issue, which you can't even talk in the family. And so many get trafficked, as you know, in this country and all that stuff.
Correct.
And
Mm,
then
mm,
they
mm.
came up with this, the trouble, what it was, they came up with the solutions. And then they made these little games out on that. So those were like little,
Okay,
that Samp, Snakes, Ladder, CD games with all the,
correct.
what can lead you to what and all. And then these girls took those games and they went back and they were playing with other girls. It's not me going and talking about anti-trafficking. It means nothing really to these kids. But
Yeah,
girls who are from the same community, same age group, they basically, so they go on that space. And
yeah, yeah.
how fulfilling it is for any of us. I mean, when you're a little kid and in your class homework, the teacher
Mm.
puts 1 star on your homework and you're so proud of it. Just
Yes,
imagine as a teenager or as a young person, you feel that you're making such a difference. And this,
correct.
because we all have empathy. Unfortunately, it's just buried
Yes.
because the world we live in, right? So I
Mm.
think what you are doing right now is just so amazing. I think these different
And
verticals you have developed, I think it just needs to get to into a space where they can take this and amplify it with whatever it is.
yes,
It's not about going and finding a community to go plug into it. You may
yes,
just create a
yes.
social media space out of it. So
Correct,
it's just own up the space. I think that's
correct.
brilliant. That's
And
I love
and
hearing that.
I've I've revived this moral science which we used to go through
Right,
35 or 40 years back in the schools when we started. There used to be one subject called moral science for all
Great.
of
yeah,
us to learn the stories and things like that. But somehow these days that is not there for
right,
these kids,
yeah,
so they don't listen to the stories or take this thing out of it.
yeah,
I've made it compulsory every 1 hour for every year.
right,
I interact with them
I
and tell them moral stories to bring in that this thing, universal human values karke.
right.
What is ethics? What it means
Nanda,
to
I
be.
will have to connect you to him so
Yes,
that
sir.
you can do a
Yes, yes,
night-long
yes.
discussion with him one of those days. He's so
Definitely.
full of
So
energy too.
we are trying
What
to
I will
bring
do
that
is
back.
it's past our 75-minute kind of thing.
Yes,
Thank
yes,
you,
yes,
Samar
yes.
Okay.
Jodha, once again for being with us,
Thank you so
for
much for
sharing
this
your brilliant
opportunity.
No,
insights.
thank you. It's very inspiring,
Thank you so
actually.
much.
Thank
Yes,
you
yes.
very much,
Please do
Samar.
come down
Pleasure
to
to
our
have you here.
institution if you're
Thank you
there
very
in
much.
Bangalore sometime.
Yes. Any
Yes,
last words from either Payal or Jaideep?
Yes, thank you. Just want to say a big, big, big thank you, Samar. I enjoyed the session as much as
thank you.
everybody else. So thank you.
Yes,
Thanks,
yes.
thanks. Yeah.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure listening to you.
Thank you
Thank
so much for
Excellent.
this opportunity.
All right,
Thank
and
you so
I'm
much.
there to reach out if you guys need me in person. Just a little calendar thing. I'll show up whichever town, city it is. All right.
Absolutely.
Oh, sure.
Yes.
Thank
Yeah.
you
Thank
so
you, all
much.
of you
Yeah.
students out
Thank
here.
you. Thank you. Bye.
I wish you had spoken. I wish you have learned enough from what you heard from this remarkable man, who's so full of energy. Rajneesh Joshi, let me acknowledge your presence here. Nice to have you here. Uh, Thanks once again. It's 80 minutes past our past 75-minute kind of slot that we have.
Okay.
But someone
Thank you,
listening to you
sir.
was very, very fascinating, full of life.
Yes,
This is
yes,
what life's
yes,
about in some ways.
Yes.
yes, yes, yes.
And I must tell you, my last sentence, you'll bear with me on. Payal's father, for all that he represented in industry and such, had 7 shirts. He had one horrible red color tie that Payal, I think, had gifted to him. And apart from which, I think he had one jacket, with a maroon jacket. That's it. And
Right.
wherever he went, it could be 3 days of a conference, he'll wear only that one jacket, right? people never knew this. A lot of us didn't know this until he passed away. So this whole what you talked about of not aggrandizing, not holding anything as possession, I think is a great value. And if some of these students can sort of nurture and nourish that kind of value over the next, say, 30-40 years of their life, they'll be far richer than you have been in your life, I would think.
Right.
Thank you, Samar. Thank you so much.
Excellent. All right.
Absolutely.
Thanks everyone for your time, and all the best to all the students. If you need anything, you can always send message on social media, Insta or something. If I can guide you guys. All right.
Then you have to organize that. You'll have to see how his mail ID or some such thing is connected, sort of connected or enabled.
And Samar, I think we should do something together with Red Balloon and PJMT.
Yes,
you should.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Let's keep in touch. We can do a phone exchange after this. I mean, if they can send me the number, and of course, I mean, I'd love to. It's just little. I just need to figure out the timing because we are just running all the time. But I'm sure we program it. We can do it.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Absolutely.
We must tie up with him and try and see what.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not about Thank you so much, all of you. Then.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye.